ESPN has come out with their top 100 players. Where do some of the Bama guys fall?
You are Locked On Bama, your daily podcast on the Alabama Crimson Tide. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back into Locked On Bama. Luke Robinson, it's me, Jimmy Stein. He didn't make it. Of course, I'm with the HSA Radio Network, and Jimmy Stein was with Bama Online. But Jimmy just couldn't be here today. I don't know if y'all know, but he's moving, and he's got a lot going on. So didn't want to leave you hanging because there is a lot of stuff out there to talk about. And want to thank Gametime for being the sponsor of this particular podcast, and want to thank all of our everydayers for tuning in every single day. Sorry, Jimmy is not here again in advance. But I did want to talk about several things going on today, the first of which is this new ESPN All-American team, which is out. And, you know, do you feel like Alabama is getting more and more disrespected by the minute? I'll give them some credit, though. I'll give ESPN some credit. First of all, they have Parker Brailsford as first-team All-American center. I haven't seen him listed as a first-team All-American center in a lot of places. But I think it's certainly a viable, if not probable, option. It should be something that a lot of people are considering because he was fantastic last year. And also, you got to remember that if this ought to help Jalen Milroe too. If Milroe was as good as he was last year, and he was very good, I know he gets his criticism. He was very good as he was last year, with the bad snaps that were numerous. Think about how great he's going to be this year with a guy that can actually snap the ball to him where he wants it. And I think that's going to be crucial. They also put Tyler Booker as first-team All-American. Okay, I do feel very good about that. I guess what I'm not seeing, though, and I really hope to see, was at least Deontay Lawson on the list here, and he is not listed among the first-team All-Americans by ESPN. What is interesting, of course, Caleb Downs is. I hate seeing it, but it's certainly something that a lot of people are going to have as well. They do have Graham Nicholson as the first-team All-American kicker. I think that's a no-brainer in the sense that he did win the Luke Rosa last year, so makes a lot of sense. And they have James Burnip as a second-team All-American. And again, Jimmy has been huge on him. I will give ESPN, again, a little more credit. They do have Deontay Lawson as second team behind, interestingly, Danny Stutzman from Oklahoma. That's another thing I wanted to point out about this All-American list and this top 100 that I'm going to go over in a second from ESPN. First of all, think about the number of opponents Alabama is playing on this All-American list. Carson Beck from Georgia. He's number one quarterback. Then Luther Burden, the wide receiver from Missouri, who I absolutely love. I think he's going to be fantastic as an NFL player. He is first-team All-American. Alabama plays Missouri, of course. They play Will Campbell and LSU, first-team All-American. They play Tate Ratledge in Georgia, first-team All-American. They play Cooper Mays in Tennessee, second-team All-American. Emory Jones, second-team All-American from LSU. James Pierce, who, spoiler alert, is the number one player on ESPN's top 100 from Tennessee. Obviously, Alabama plays him. And then there's Michael Williams from Georgia, second-team All-American. And one more here, Malachi Starks from Georgia is first-team All-American. So, yeah, I mean, Alabama's certainly going to be up against it this year. Aside from Deontay Lawson not being first team, I guess I shouldn't have said that I have a problem with this because I do feel like Deontay Lawson is going to end up being first team All-American across the board. I think he's going to have a fantastic year. I do want to move over and talk about this top 100 they have. They have Malachi Moore at number 99. Okay, I think he's a little better than that. I think he deserves a little more respect than that as well. But again, talent-wise, that's probably about right. Impact on the team-wise, I don't think that's right at all. Nico Iamaleava, I hope I'm saying that, makes the list from Tennessee, and at number 92. And again, I love this kid. I think he's going to be fantastic. That may be a little high. If you want to have your heart broken, Isaiah Bond makes it at number 86. That's something else that jumped out to me. There was not another Alabama receiver. He's not even an Alabama receiver, but there wasn't an Alabama receiver on this list. And I'm going to tell you something. I know they can't put him on there now. I'm telling you, I feel like Ryan Williams will be on this list by the end of the year. I know that we oversell Ryan Williams on a consistent basis here at Locked On Bama, but I'm telling you, I think he'll be on this list at the end. Jabbar Muhammad from Washington is on this list at number 70. That was somebody that, actually he's at Oregon now, but that was somebody that Alabama thought may transfer over to the Tide when Alabama got their new coaching regime. Parker Brailsford, again, makes the list at number 68. I think that's certainly viable. I'm not going to go down the entire list. Jalen Milroe makes the list. Tyler Booker makes the list. I think you could make the case for eventually Justice Haynes making the list, and Jam Miller. Maybe one of those two will make the list at the end of the year. But I love seeing this. This is a lot of fun. At the very bottom, the top of the list is interesting. James Pierce is number 1, as I mentioned, in Alabama, does play Tennessee on the road this year. He's going to be difficult. At one time, and it's funny because last year he was unranked in this list. At one time, there was at least a mild scuttlebutt about James Pierce transferring to Alabama. That would have been something pretty incredible. Mason Graham, another guy that people were talking about transferring when Michigan had their turnover. He's number 2. Travis Hunter is number 3. Look, I love Travis Hunter. I think he's a great player. Do I think he's the 3rd best player in the country? I do not. I know a lot of people are hung up on Travis Hunter. They just think he's fabulous. I just don't think of him as the 3rd best player in the country. I just don't. And Will Johnson, who obviously had a lot of rumors transferring to Alabama, is number 4, and Luther Burden, number 5. So, again, and Will Campbell, number 6, it should be noted. Carson Beck, number 7. So a lot of Alabama opponents way up on this list. A lot of guys that were talked about possibly transferring to Alabama way up on this list. It's a lot of fun to see these things, if you ask me, every single year. I mean, I know that a lot of folks feel like this is just fodder until we get to actual kickoff time, which next week we got Florida State and Georgia Tech in Ireland, and I'm looking forward to that one. So, look, when we come back, I want to talk a little bit about Dorian Barney, who is the only commitment for Alabama in this 26 class. But, some interesting stuff I just read about him. But I do want to tell you about Gametime. Look, I've said this a million times, and I told one of our national salesmen this yesterday. Gametime is the one live read. I don't have to look at anything. I just tell you guys from the bottom of my heart that I have used Gametime a bunch. I used it to buy my Wisconsin tickets. A friend of mine reached out to me the other day and said, "Hey, where'd you get your Wisconsin tickets?" I told him Gametime, and he's going to Gametime to get them because I told him what a great deal I got, how easy it was, how I could see where I'm going to be sitting. And he's a first-time user, so he'll be able to use Locked On College as the code to get $20 off. When you go to Gametime and you're a first-time user, use that code Locked On College to get $20 off. I mean, again, I got a great deal, can't beat it, great seats, looking forward to it. Me and 3 of my friends going to go check out Bama beat up on Wisconsin, hopefully. So Gametime is the place to get your tickets. I've used it for the World Series, used it for NBA, college basketball, college baseball, college football, NFL. I've used it for everything that I love. And I'm telling you, go check out Gametime. You will love it. I want to remind everybody to check out Locked On College Football. Spencer McLaughlin does a fantastic job. And Jimmy and I have both been guests on that before. He covers the Tide a lot. There's always something interesting in there. So go check out Locked On College Football. It's part of Locked On Podcast Network, which is your team every day. So go check them out. Wanted to mention and talk about Dorian Barney just a little bit because this is an interesting cat. He's the only commitment for Alabama right now in this 26 class. Certainly that'll change probably sooner rather than later. And his football season actually starts tomorrow night. He is transferred to Carrollton, and I think that is wonderful. Look, that is a fantastic program there. He was at Peachtree Ridge, which I don't know much about them at all. I don't know a ton about Georgia football to begin with, but I've never even heard of Peachtree Ridge. I've heard of Carrollton. And you know why? Because Caleb Odom played at Carrollton. Juju Lewis, who a lot of people have talked about this year, is at Carrollton now. Zealous Hicks, who is a guy that Alabama is sort of kind of hoping to reclassify as a safety for the 26th class, and Alabama's involved with him in either class that he ends up being in. He's on that team. Carrollton is they're a problem for folks. So going to play there and being next to folks like Zealous Hicks and playing with Juju Lewis and playing the schedule they're going to play. They play a powerhouse schedule as well. They play, they'll be on TV. So I love getting kids like that. Look, it's always fun to get the underdog, right? It's always fun to get the kid with the chip on his shoulder that nobody thought he could make it from the 1A program. That's fun sometimes. But for the most part, give me the kids that have already had the spotlight on them. By the way, Dorian Barney has been ranked in the top 70 players of the country already for 2026. So he's a big deal. Another great cornerback. What I love about him, he talks about himself in the sense that, hey, I'm a hitter. I love to play downhill. I love to come after you. I love to knock your block off. And he seems to be locked in with Alabama. Things change every day. We know this, you know this, and it just happens a lot. But he seems to be very locked in. He seems to be very proud of the fact he is committed to Alabama. And I feel like he's going to stick in this class. But Dorian Barney will be playing tomorrow. Going to be exciting. We will talk about his performance on Locked On Bama when Jimmy comes back. And Jimmy should be back tomorrow, by the way. So we will certainly talk about his performance the first of next week. One other thing that I want to bring up is you see here in the listing where I say culture specialist, this is just something that I just read on Bama 24/7. And it was, I didn't even think about this. Okay. There's a guy on staff named Ron McKeefery, and his official title is special assistant to the head coach. And the first thing I thought of being a fan of The Office is he's assistant to the regional manager. And so initially you're like, okay, what is this? And maybe this is some weird left coast stuff that's coming over here to Alabama, because we're so used to Nick Saban's culture of you're going to be here at this time and you're going to perform this way at this time. And that's the way it's going to be forever. And if you don't do it that way, you won't be playing and you just won't be a part of this team. Trust me, as a guy who was very fortunate to have lunch with Nick Saban and some other folks at one time, we got our salads at 11:17. We got our tea refilled at 11:20. We ate at 11:28, and then we were gone by 11:42. So, I mean, Saban has it down to a science, right? But this guy is considered a culture specialist, right? He and Kalen DeBoer have known each other for a long time. McKeefery has been in the pros. He's been with the Bengals. He's been at the small school level. He's been at the big school level. Obviously, he's been at Washington. Now he's certainly at Alabama. Just a really, really interesting cat. And I'm not going to spoil the entire article because I don't think that's what I should do here on this podcast. But I do want to tell you that I feel like the Alabama culture is in very, very good hands. One story that came out of this was about how McKeefery was involved with Green Berets at one time in the U.S. Army Special Forces. I think he was just sort of a counselor for them. He wasn't actually involved with it the way it reads. But one of the stories was about how there was one particular Green Beret that was told, hey, I want you to do pull-ups until failure. Failure meaning you can't do another one. And this particular Special Forces Green Beret did these pull-ups until he blacked out and busted his head. And then he got stitches with no anesthesia. And then he got back up on the bar to do more. And the whole point of the story is, according to McKeefery, like, look, Alabama, the University of Alabama's got more dudes with more physical attributes and physical talents and just Adonis-like bodies than these Green Berets. But the catch is you need to get up to the mentality of those Green Berets. Like, I'm just going to keep going till I can't go anymore. And boy, when I read that and I heard about that, I just thought that fires me up, because that's what we think about when we think about too full of Bama. When we think about, I know it's a joke, but the guy coming off the sideline to make the tackle in the 50s because he saw an opposing team running for a touchdown. That guy was just too full of Bama, right? Crimson Flame, the whole thing. That's what you want, is that mentality. Like, you just don't quit. And Nick Saban had that culture. There's a lot of talk about Hugh Freeze and what he said the other day about how he should be 4 wins against Nick Saban, because he gave up a 24-3 lead, I believe, in 2016. But you know what? I think that says more about Alabama than it does about Ole Miss. I think, and Hugh Freeze, I think that it was Alabama not giving up, not quitting. And they come back and they win that game. And in fact, they should have won by double digits. They should have won going away, but there were a couple of things that happened late that got kind of weird. But I just love the fact that kind of culture is continuing at Alabama. The don't quit, but in a different way. Nick Saban had make his blank quit attitude, which was like, we want them to quit before we quit. But this new culture seems to be more like, we're not worried about you quitting. We're just not going to quit. We're not imposing our will for you to quit. It's just, you won't make us quit. And I think both ways can certainly work. And it's just, I thought it was fascinating. I really did. I thought it was a great article. I encourage folks to read up on this new cultural specialist at Alabama, who's assistant to the regional manager. All right, a few other just odd and end things here to wrap up this singular podcast. Again, go check out Locked On College Football. Spencer McLaughlin does a great job. He will have more on some of these topics I'm about to touch on. And also, thank you guys for bearing with me going solo today. One thing that I wanted to bring up, I'm hoping to have a crossover episode with Locked On Badgers soon, because Wisconsin has named Tyler Van Dyke as their starting quarterback. Now, of course, he started out in Miami. A lot of folks thought he may not even win the job with Wisconsin. Of course, they called him Tyler Van Dyke back in the day in Miami. I say back in the day, like a couple of years ago. But he comes to Wisconsin and, they're going to try and throw the ball around a little more. So I really dig this for a couple of reasons. If they are going to try and throw the ball around a little more, it's still Wisconsin. I don't mean that as an insult. Wisconsin is known for their running backs, right? I mean, the Ron Danes, Melvin Gordons, those dudes. They're not known for throwing the football in a straightforward fashion. They're sort of like, Iowa makes them look like the, hurry up, no huddle, but they are, even by Big Ten standards, they're a running team, non-passing team. So if they're transitioning to more passing, I think what a great opportunity for our young defensive backs to be tested against a quarterback who has experience but isn't fantastic. I mean, he's good. I'm not trying to diss him. He's good, but I wouldn't consider him in the top 3 or 4 quarterbacks Alabama's going to face this year. And against a team that is learning to pass the ball more versus being very experienced in passing the ball more. I'd be a lot more worried. Say what you want to, if Alabama were even playing, say, Lincoln Riley and USC in game 3, because even though defensively they're a sieve, I think that it would be difficult for our defensive backs to handle a Lincoln Riley offense right off the bat. So I'm glad they're going to get a good experience against a good quarterback, against what is probably a good yet not quite developed system. So I think that they'll get some good experience moving forward. And then, they have a week off and they play Georgia, and they play against Carson Beck, who I've already mentioned in this podcast is first team All-American on ESPN and other sites. So I'm digging that matchup more and more and more. And I can't wait to go. And as I mentioned, go to Gametime, get your Wisconsin tickets, and you can meet Luke Robinson. A couple other things that I wanted to throw out there that were interesting. Jimmy and I have really been talking about injuries lately. Now, Alabama hadn't dealt with any. They have dealt with people being banged up. We talked about on the podcast yesterday about how some of the running backs, we were down to one scholarship running back actually doing drills and actually practicing, right? And that was Justice Hayes. So the problem that we're seeing around the SEC is there's some folks getting hurt. On Sports Blitz, my show that I do on Tuesday nights with Andy Graham, that you can see all over the state of Alabama, we had a guest from Kentucky on. Their starting running back is probably going to miss at least the first 2 games. And that's huge because their third game, I believe they play Georgia. That's going to be a problem. Kentucky can't afford to lose anybody. Oklahoma and Missouri, respectively, have both lost a couple of guys here recently. I'm going to pull up their names, but I know that the Missouri kid he was a transfer in from the Big Ten, and he was expected, or actually from Georgia, sorry, Darius Smith. He was expected to play a lot, and that's a problem for them. Oklahoma, their wide receiver, Jaden Gibson, out for the year. So the reason I bring these up is and these are teams Alabama is playing. So you're already seeing injuries play a factor in the schedule coming up. And cross your fingers, Alabama hadn't dealt with any of that yet. Anything that's going to be catastrophic. We've already talked about Texas. They've lost their 2 top running backs. And they're down to Jaden Blue, who, I mean, some of you may remember him from recruiting, a really good player. I know Alabama was involved at one time. But, man, if you're Texas and you've got this schedule that sets up so nicely and you avoid LSU and Bama, I mean, yeah, you have to play Georgia, but you avoid Tennessee. You don't have to play a lot of the big dogs this year. You avoid Ole Miss. You avoid Missouri. God, Texas has got a great setup. So if you start having injuries, that's going to end up being a problem for you. So I just find it, here we are right at the beginning of the season, and we're already seeing some folks go down for the year. And it just goes to show you how fragile these rosters can be and how important it is when we ultimately get to that. You can have 105 players, I think it is, or something like that, and on scholarship, and how much more important that's going to be to have a big roster size, because we're playing more games now. Where the league is tougher. We just added 2 of the all-time winningest programs in college football history to the SEC. It's going to be more important than ever to have big-time depth. So I just found these injuries to be very interesting, and they do affect Alabama. So, look, appreciate all you guys bearing with me today. I know that the podcast is better with Jimmy. I appreciate what Jimmy brings to the table, but he couldn't be here today, and I didn't want to just not have something. So appreciate you guys so much. Thank you every day. Please do subscribe. And until next time, everybody, roll Tide.